Greetings, sir and sirettes, and welcome back to From the Depths with me, Lathrix, and of course, welcome to the sandbox mode, in which we are going to be doing a little bit of research and development. In today's episode, I would very much like to try and build my first ever hovercraft, and then if we have time, do a little bit of work on our other vehicles, although that really depends on how much time we actually have. Now, the vehicle you see in front of you is not one of my designs, as you can probably tell by the fact it actually looks pretty good. It is actually one of the Lightning Hoods. Now, this is an enemy we haven't fought yet, so I won't be spawning in any other vehicles from this faction, but after asking around as to which vehicle I should spawn in to get a basic grasp of how their hovercrafts actually work, a lot of people told me to spawn in this one, because it's cheap, it's not very spoiler heavy, and the weapon isn't particularly powerful, so nice and simple, and let's see how it works. So, I do know of two ways of setting up hovercraft. The first, I believe, is how this one is being set up, using the dedicated Helleblade spinners and then simply using control blocks. Now, this is the cheapest, the easiest by far, and honestly, one of the more just straightforward ways to build a hovercraft, because what happens is these control blocks will control the nearby rotor blade, and I'm assuming each rotor blade has a set of them nearby, and will turn the rotor blade either to maximum speed or a lower speed, depending on how high these two blocks are, because thankfully, all of these controls are relative to where the control block is, not where the entire vehicle is, unless it's very specific in saying a certain speed or something, in which case it does then apply to the vehicle itself rather than just the control block. So, if on this side, for instance, the ground is further than 8 away, the rotor blade will turn on, and then if it is closer than 8, other way around, sorry. If the ground is closer than 8 meters to this block, it will turn on to full. If it's further than 8 meters, it will slow down. Trying to understand this and talk, not a good concept really. So what happens is, that would basically control the pitch all by itself. Well, at least the roll, and then the pitch I assume is controlled by this one. Yes, it is. Yep, this is purely for the pitch controls. And what you have, in the end, is this. It's a hovercraft, and will be very good even on uneven terrain, because the rotor blades themselves will constantly be causing the vehicle to try to stay as flat as possible. Of course, it will rock around quite a bit, but that's just how it's going to be. Quite fast as well. Now, it does have quite a powerful engine, which seems to be very fuel inefficient, although it doesn't need that much engine power simply to run the rotor blades and the thrusters. I'm assuming all of that engine power is for the laser. Yes, it is. Okay, so that's how this is set up, and that's how I'm going to set up my own hovercraft, just to make things easier. Now, the second way we could do this, and I would say is probably the better way, if you have enough time to do it, and you understand how it works, is by using one of these lovely things, the PID, because you can set very specific controls to this, which then cause the vehicle to fly quite straight and quite even. I've seen some designs use this, but it's something which is quite difficult, and it's actually quite easy to mess up as the vehicle takes damage. Although honestly, so is this way of building, so I'm not 100% sure how I'm going to end up doing this, but I think for my very first hovercraft, I will use the the rotor blades and control blocks, and then perhaps in the future I will mess around with this, maybe on a stream or something, because I will need to actually learn how to do that. A little while later, so right now we have a 1000 volume craft. It's made out of only light alloy metal. It has a very small engine block in the center, which is giving us a grand total of 4000 engine power. And then we have some very small dedicated Helleblade spinners located in several parts of the vehicle. So what should happen, now I'm not saying this will happen, but what should happen is when I let go of this vehicle, it should slowly go towards the ground, and then when either the front or back starts to dip, it should start going upwards, and then it should be able to maintain a certain height. It currently doesn't have any pitch control, it has no natural roll control, and the center of mass is really in the wrong place, because it's just a test shell. Well, letting go now. Let's just check the altitude. Yeah, okay, that is working. So there we are. That will not go any lower or any higher. It's actually hovering at a certain altitude, so it is definitely working. One thing I did notice while I was making this is that this will actually work over water as well, because it detects water in the same way it can detect land. So that's really, really cool. This will not only be used in the land campaign if we make it well. I'm not crazy about the shape just yet, and it looks more like a spaceship than anything else, but for a test, it'll do, it'll do. So now we need a pitch control, which will go on the back, and then we need thrust and an AI. At that point, we should have the very basics sorted. As much as it looks really silly right now, this thing is actually managing to keep its altitude really well. It just needs much better pitch controls. So one way we could do that is actually having these rotor blades a little bit further out, or by having dedicated rotor blades, or even a very basic PID system. Either way though, for just slapping on some thrusters, I am amazed that this thing is actually working. Okay. So, I've stopped it for a second here because now the ground becomes uneven, and I'm almost certain this thing will not be able to pitch itself upwards fast enough not to crash, particularly at this speed. So, just a warning. You're kidding me. You are actually kidding me. It's able to do it. And then it goes down. Well, it should go down now, but the thrust is too powerful. So, obviously, this thing needs to be a little bit heavier, and the center of mass needs to be lower, but it was able to actually dodge the mountains and go up naturally, because the front, as soon as the front section detects that the ground near the front is rising, it will then raise the front to compensate for this. It's an automatic detection system, essentially. It is going down, just not fast enough. The thrusters, I think, are pitching upwards a little bit too much. So this is where I'm going to end building this vehicle. So this one now is a fully fledged hovercraft. Yes, it looks terrible, and yes, it's moving around far too much because it was a test and nothing else. It's not balanced, and the pitch control still isn't properly in there or anything like that. But it does work, and that was the whole point, just to make a functional hovercraft somewhat quickly before I move on to making something a little bit more serious. So it has everything you could possibly want. It has weapons, detection, AI, movement capabilities, ammunition, fuel. It is a functional craft in all purposes. So, let's spawn in an enemy just to test out the weapons to make sure it can actually work, and then I'll start making something a little bit more permanent. So, let's spawn in something we've seen before. I've not seen this one, the Scarab. So apparently there are enemies I haven't seen yet, so let's just spawn in the Orion, which is absolutely miles away. Okay, it's a capturing hovercraft, so that was fairly quick and fairly effective. The missiles hit the back, killed the AI, we rammed into it, and then we captured the Orion. Nice, simple, and straightforward, and look how oversized this thing is. So, destroy all vehicles, I don't want to save that. About an hour later, and I've got a very basic hover tank built. This is actually going to replace the Angron, and amazingly, it's going to be far cheaper, but around about the same size. It's going to be far more vulnerable, but far quicker, and hopefully able to scale areas a lot better. The engines on the inside have also been made correctly, so they don't overheat. The biggest con to this vehicle over the Angron will simply be the fact that there's no shields and there is very little heavy armor, so if this does get hit by anything particularly powerful, it's just going to explode like all the other tanks. But hopefully, because of the fact it's less than half of the cost, that won't be such a big deal. So let's see if it can even get over this slope. Yes, it can! Fantastic! And then after the slope, will it balance back out? Yes, it will! That is actually fantastic. I wasn't expecting that to work first time. So there we are. This hovercraft is actually functional. Now, we need to go somewhere which is far rockier, like over there. So that's what we're going to do. This is actually quite a bit in the future from the previous clip, so I was having a couple of problems with the tank hitting things along its side, so I decided to respawn in the Lightning Hood's Wisp, and it seems like the Wisp actually had the same problems, but far more extreme. It was constantly clipping things, hitting rocks, hitting mountains, and pretty much anything which was in its way, and the reason being, this rotor blade at the front, being so centralized, doesn't really account for the two sides. So every time something was suddenly rising here or here, it was simply hitting it. So I would like to think that from learning this, I've actually made my tank a little bit better than the Wisp, at least in dealing with very, very extreme terrain. Now, I did just spawn this thing in right here, and that isn't exactly fair, because this is the type of terrain I would never send a vehicle into under any circumstance, but something like this section, I would very much like the hovercraft to be able to deal with. So let's spawn in the test vehicle yet again. There it is, vehicle test version 1. It'll probably crash, gotta spawn it so far, and let's put it into fleet move and make it move outwards. So go over here. The engines will quiet down in a second once the batteries are fully charged. So as you can see, when the front gets near anything, it now has some emergency control blocks which will only turn on if the corners detect something very close by. These are much more powerful rotor blades than the others, but they don't have the consistent speed which the others do, because all the other rotor blades are constantly on. Even when it's trying to get the tank to go downwards, they're simply slowed down. But the corner ones shut off completely, and that means that it's not going to be suddenly blindsided if the terrain is very, very uneven. So I'm actually very, very happy with how the tank is turning out. I think I'm doing a pretty good job. I will be trying the other type of hover tank fairly soon, but for now, I'm happy. And I do apologise for how technical this video is sort of getting, and how bad I am at explaining things like that, but I'm actually having fun with this. It's something new for me. Well, here we are, finally in the campaign, many hours after starting this recording. At least we're going to get, at minimum, a single test done. So we have the 2 vehicle test 1s, which of course really need to be named something, along with a single Krull, in order to keep them stocked full of fuel. If they do well, I believe the hull I've made for the test vehicle is actually going to be a really decent one, in terms of being able to be easily retrofitted. It wouldn't take much effort at all to turn them into a swarm missile carrier, or perhaps even holding some kind of advanced cannon, or perhaps even a laser or railgun, because of the high engine capacity. So it's certainly something we can work on in the future, if the hull works in combat. And this is the test, because I haven't tested them out yet in the sandboxes. Honestly, that's just not very fun. So the Krull can go near the back as always, and you both can circle around the enemy. Hopefully, the combat will go okay. It's being controlled by a land AI, so as long as it plays nicely with the thrusters, they should be able to broadside the enemy as if they're a regular tank, just kind of floating. Naturally, now we get into the battle with the fog currently looming, I instantly remember something. I have completely forgot to add shields to these things. They definitely have enough power for shields, but I've just forgot to add them, so that's something we can upgrade in the future. So let's see how the weapons will do. So these are more short-range harassment vehicles than anything else, at least at the moment. So how good is the EMP? Well, one of them is now AI dead, the missiles are hitting just after the EMP, and apparently they're all dead. That was really weird. It was almost like they were being attracted to each other by some kind of unforeseen force, but either way, every single enemy is AI dead. Definitely better than the Angron's weapon. It seemed to work a lot better, and I think this one is already out of fuel because I was doing some testing making sure it can move a moment ago, and apparently didn't give enough time for the Krull to actually refuel them. So let's pull all of you out. Once you're back into your group, you should be fed fuel from the Krull. You're not being fed fuel, why not? Oh, because you're not in the same group. Okay, now they're being fed fuel, and now they can all activate again. I said activate half Dalek-y then. That was very odd. Let's find someone else to test against. And so we move on to the next battle versus a Kingfisher, a Brushcutter, a Bear, and a Scarab. I don't think I've seen that before. I don't remember the name anyway, so that is an enemy I perhaps haven't seen, which is actually really, really fun, considering how long we've now been fighting against the Steel Empire. So let's just spawn in to make sure the water doesn't spawn in first this time, and let's see how we do. First things first, let's have a look at the Scarab. I'm thinking, yep, that's definitely a tank I've not seen before, and wow, it's made out of almost completely heavy armor, which is actually really bad for it, considering I am using EMP, which destroys heavy armor rather than transferring the EMP damage, so the armor itself is going to be utterly obliterated, or at least that's what should happen. It's got a couple of hidden missiles, which are EMP missiles, and it has one rather large advanced cannon, and is that a turret? I think it is. I can't imagine this thing can only fire forwards. That's a really cool design. That's how the Angron should have looked, although I'm not overly keen on how the front kind of sticks out like that. It is a really cool way to do the heavy armor. Begin the battle. Our EMP is very inaccurate. Hopefully we can get a bit closer very soon. Oh, taking so many hits! I don't know why that went straight forwards then. That really should have been broadsiding. I think I may have the settings a little bit too lax, because that got far too close. One of the enemies have been destroyed, although that was mostly from the missiles. The EMP soloing the next enemy, and massive explosions from the Scarab. I'm not too sure what killed it. Well, did the damage, but it was very, very painful indeed. So as you can see, the heavy armor is being peeled away by the EMP, rather than the EMP damage being transferred. He was actually doing quite a good job. Maybe I underestimate the power of heavy armor against EMP damage. Have both of my vehicles run out of fuel? They have. Clearly I'm still not refueling correctly. I will have to check that after the fight. The Krull has also been very slightly upgraded. It now has one more missile and it has more ammunition. That's why it's still continuously firing the volleys this far into the battle. It means the Krull is actually a decent combat vehicle now, rather than just being a mobile refinery. Goodbye. Lovely. Is that the last enemy? No, there is still an enemy left. What is... Oh, the enemy Scarab is still there. Stop. No, why? Just stop firing. If these missiles don't kill it, we can steal it very, very easily. Please don't kill it. Krull. Good. Hello, Scarab. The Scarab has a transmitter attached to the fuel. Scarab, why are you listening to your fuel? Oh. Oh, I see. The AI was just underneath there. I feel like perhaps they simply mirror moded whilst building, and that's why there was a transmitter attached to this thing. I wonder how much this is worth. Well, first of all, we're going to save the Scarab, because I do want to spawn it in later to have a quick look-see at it, to see if we can perhaps retrofit it to be something of use to us, but for now, I think I'm just going to scrap it. So, thank you very much for the bonus resources of that fight. 25,000 resource, that is absolutely fantastic. The refueling problem has now been fixed, although after looking back at the footage and looking at how much fuel we've been using, I have to say the new hovercraft cannot be used as our main force. Although it is doing very well, the amount of fuel it consumes is over 8,000 resource worth per battle, at least between the two of them, which is the equivalent of losing a cultist and a half every single fight, which just is not worth it. We also need more than one Krull to provide that much fuel between battles, so I'm not quite certain what I'm going to do about that. The main thing I can do, although I don't really want to, is perhaps to weaken the weapon a little bit so it's more efficient, taking away the overclock so that the engines don't have to provide so much power towards the batteries. This way we would have a direct way of controlling fuel consumption. As nighttime arrives, it's time to move on to our final test of the day. Let's see how the hovercraft do when very, very outnumbered. If we win this battle, even with the massive fuel consumption, I will consider the hovercraft a success. Already they are outshining the Angron, but can they battle and win when the enemy have a sheer force advantage? If we lose this, there is no shame, but if we win it, it will be glorious. And against us we have a bear, a scarab, a bear, a kingfisher, and a brush cutter. So let's begin. I may have forgot to change that after that last fight. Once again, the inaccuracy of the weapon showcasing. 1 hit against the bear with the EMP, 2 hits against the bear, sadly not doing that much. It really does depend on where they hit. Ooh, cram cannon shot. Oh wow, that hovercraft is being beat up. I'm surprised it's still going, honestly. These are quite vulnerable craft. One of the enemy was rendered AI dead, but it looks like the hovercraft is going to be taken out. Where's the other one? The other one is behind it, for some reason running away. Not quite sure what's going on there. Yep, that first hovercraft is now dead. The second one is fighting its hardest, but being defeated by the Scarab. Admittedly, the Scarab is a full 10,000 resource more in terms of cost, and actually does very well against EMP, but even so. Yeah, that inaccuracy actually was the downfall of the hovercraft there. The Krull is happily trying its hardest in the background. It is, however, being beaten up by the enemy Kingfisher, I think that one is? Oh no. The enemy Scarab is using the hovercraft as a meat shield. The entire volley of the Krull. Oh no, only half of the volley of the Krull was absorbed by the hovercraft. Did a fair bit of damage to it. I'm surprised that heavy armor is actually a pretty good counter against EMP. I thought it died easier than that, but apparently not. I do think that the particle cannons do need a little bit more accuracy though, even though their lack of accuracy is fueling their damage, which is why they're doing so much damage even whilst shooting every second. It's just far too inaccurate. I think an increased charge time is what's going to have to happen. The Krull showcasing how hardy it is, despite the fact it is essentially just it is alive! It is a living fuel refinery. And that's its main purpose. It's still surviving hits fairly well. Keep on tanking, Krull. I believe in you. The first of the hovercraft is now officially dead. The second one is just downed. Are those missiles even in range? Yes, they are. Sadly not taking out the turret. Yeah, this is definitely a loss. There's no way we can come back from this. Even if the Krull releases a volley now, it goes for the right enemy, which is sinking in the water, it's just not going to happen. Stop bullying my hovercraft. The missiles are still there, but it's not firing. I think the control block's been damaged. Let's get on board. Can I please fire the weapon? No, I can't. Something's gone wrong with the weapon. Yeah, this is pretty much dead. I will cool this battle. End options. I will allow that. Wait, they actually got out alive? No, I was going to say, that would have been bizarre. So, eventually, the enemy were able to defeat us, though I think the hovercraft has a lot of potential. It does need a couple of changes, especially in terms of the cannon itself. It needs to be more fuel efficient, or at least cost less energy per shot, and it needs a very small accuracy buff. Not by much, considering it's meant to be quite close quarters, but just a little bit. In that last fight, it could have easily defeated the Scarab, or at least took off the weapons, if one of the shots actually hit. So with that, thank you so much for watching. If you have enjoyed the video, then of course, likes, favourites, shares, comments, all that good stuff helps out me, helps out the channel, and most importantly, shows that From the Depths is a series you wish to see continued in the future. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye. In the next episode, we will improve on the hovercraft.